Good morning. So we're going to give you a snapshot this morning of food import regulations in the United States. Just to give you a quick intro of why I'm up here. I'm the president of the Association of Food Industries. I was introduced a month or so ago as one of the founders of AFI, but it's been around since 1906, and I have not been around that long. But we're the Food Import Industries Trade Association in the United States. So we have 1,000+ member companies around the world, U.S. importers or foreign companies shipping product to the U.S. or people offering products or services to them. We're the voice of the food import sector, essentially. We focus on compliance. We want to make sure people know what the rules are and how to follow them, which leads us into why I'm speaking to you today. Everything really centers in the United States in terms of food safety law around this FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act. And by the way, there's much more information that I included on the slides than I'll be able to cover. But the last slide is going to have my contact information. So you can either give me a card or shoot me an email. Happy to get the slides to you. FSMA, which is about 10 years old now, and had staggered implementation dates and all that. So everything's in play with it. It has 7 major rules. And sometimes there's confusion because that's a lot. I mean, there's one book, a course that I helped put together, it's this thick. Well, that's just one of the 7 rules. So there were people at FDA doing one rule and another rule. So sometimes the terminology doesn't always match up in the best way. So, but all these rules meld together. They all feed off one another, so to speak. And we're going to focus today on the 2 that are in bold. For any producers in the room, you're subject to the preventive controls for human food. And any U.S. importers in the room, you're subject to the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And what that is doing is you are responsible for ensuring that the food produced by your suppliers meets U.S. food safety regulations. So that's what I'm going to get into today, how to do that, what to expect from your importer customers, and the like. So, yeah, just real quickly, FSMA's huge, Remember I said one of the books is this thick. It's about prevention. That's the whole idea about it. The food safety preventive control paradigm is one thing that they're saying. It's constant and it's a culture. It's something that has to be done every day, and a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's something, we'll just collect these documents, put it on the shelf. You're going to see that as we go through that if I'm importing from you, I need documentation for that specific lot code to demonstrate that it was produced in accordance with your food safety plan and that it meets U.S. food safety regulations. So this isn't something that can be done half-heartedly. It's got to be done and become part of the culture. And it's changing, too. It is evolving. They're going to add to this. And we don't know just what it's going to look like, but I can tell you one thing, it will never go away. People were hoping it would a few years ago, but it's not going to. Some current issues that U.S. importers are having, documentation. If I'm a U.S. importer and FDA knocks on my door and wants to inspect me about an entry from a couple months ago, I have to have those documents. And if my supplier is resisting providing me with those documents, I may have to stop doing business with them because I can't take the risk of FDA coming and not having what I should have when they come. And we're talking mostly about the regulatory reality today. There's also the commercial reality. My customers may want that from me, and they know I have to have it. So that's another reason documentation is key. Lack of understanding / effort, this is big. As I said, I use it huge. 7 major rules, plus all kinds of other ancillary things. So there's a lot to understand in it. Language barriers, just different perspectives because the way it's done in the producing country might be a little bit different. So that's an issue. Sometimes many U.S. importers haven't paid enough attention either to know what's really required. So it's still an issue, and sometimes it's just pure lack of effort. You know, I talked to somebody right before the pandemic. He said, "Oh yeah, FDA told me to come in next week. I haven't done a thing, and I don't plan to until after they tell me what I need to do." I'm like, well, good luck with that, because that's not the approach you want to take. And then supplier approval is an issue. This one I wanted to make sure I included up front, and I'll address it later on. But if I'm a U.S. importer, I have to have documentation to show that I approved each and every foreign supplier that I'm bringing food in from. Now, it seems kind of strange if I've been in business 30 years and I've been buying from these people already. There's a regulation that went into effect now a little over 5 years ago. It says I still have to go and approve my foreign suppliers, and I have to have a document that shows it. And that's becoming an issue. We also have arbitration service, you know, so our members will include a clause in there that says any disputes goes to AFI arbitration. Well, we had one about 2 months ago, and one of the arguments the U.S. importer was making was we couldn't take delivery because the supplier didn't give what we laid out that we needed to approve that foreign supplier. It was a new one, somebody they were just starting to buy from. So it is becoming a trade issue now as well as a food safety issue. So I like showing this slide. I stole it right from FDA. You can do that in the U.S. Anything the government puts out there, you can use. Just keep that in mind. This is the preventive control rule. So this is the one, again, that applies to the producers of food. Everything starts with a hazard analysis. You can't do anything about food safety until you analyze the product and see what hazards are there and the severity of those hazards. What's going to happen if we don't address it? And based on that, these preventive controls that we're going to put in place, how frequently do we have to put them in there, right? So everything, this whole FSMA kind of starts and revolves around a hazard analysis. Because once you identify those hazards, you put these preventive controls in place. And one thing to keep in mind too, with everything related to FSMA, if you're bringing in a wide range of products, your procedures shouldn't look the same because it may require you to do more work than you need to do. If you have a set of high-risk products and a set of lower-risk products, but all your approval processes, and if you decide, oh, we're just going to do the same verification steps for each. Well, now for these low-risk products, you've got to spend more time and money doing the high-risk verification steps and approval and the whole thing. So you want to keep that in mind. It's product-specific, anything that we're going to talk about. So you put these preventive controls in place, and then you monitor that they're being carried out. All right? It's not enough just to have this plan in place. If it says you've got to test here or clean here or what have you, you do it, and you keep records that you did it. Because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. That's essentially one of the lines FDA has been using since we started talking about this. And then there's corrective actions. Sometimes, corrective action, you need it right up front. There's a salmonella risk. Yeah, we're doing all the best practices and everything, but it may slip in there. And if it does, this is a corrective action. So if and when that happens, you take the corrective action. Now, sometimes it's going to be something new. Then you develop a new corrective action. Okay. Now, for an importer in the room, just real quick too, anytime your supplier changes, and for the suppliers in the room, you should be aware that if I'm an importer, I'm going to ask you for this. Anytime there's any change in a supplier's anywhere in the circle, I need to know about it. I don't have to necessarily approve it, but I need to know about it because I'm responsible for verifying what's happening in that facility. So if the facility makes a change in its hazard analysis or takes a different preventive control method, or even increases or decreases the frequency, I'm going to have a document that says you can do that, but you have to tell me first because I need to know what's going on in there. Because if I get inspected and my records say it's at this interval and yours is less frequent, it has to be against what my records show. So there's a lot of communication that has to take place. Then we have verification. So you're verifying, and it's slash validation. You want to validate that the preventive controls you have in place are still the norms in the industry. You're verifying everything before it has been done. And just kind of ensuring it's all in place, and then your record keeping. Again, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And it's really key for an importer, because when an importer gets inspected, it's 100% document based. So if it's not written down, you can't go and show them in the plant, well, this is what's happening in real life, and that sort of thing. That option doesn't exist. Okay. So I'm going to blow through these slides pretty quickly, but as I said, I'm going to show them, share with anybody who wants them afterwards. But you identify known or reasonably foreseeable hazards for the food to determine whether hazards are reasonably likely to occur. So there's a history of it. If I'm bringing in a product that has never had listeria as an issue, I don't have to account for it or have my supplier account for it in a hazard analysis. All right. So it's got to be known or reasonably foreseeable. And there's three types, essentially: biological, chemical, and physical. And the radiological kind of fit in the chemical. Okay. When you identify the hazards, you have to look at every step in the production cycle. One of the ones that people sometimes don't think about is transportation. You know, if it's a liquid tanker, what was in it before and what was done to clean out? Was it soy milk, where there could now be an allergen cross contact if it wasn't cleaned thoroughly? You know, those kind of things. It's got to be kept in there. And sanitation, including employee hygiene, is another one that sometimes slips. It's not the issue it used to be, but it still does come in there sometimes. These are some of the required controls. And allergens, I'll just talk real quick about that. It's nearly half of the recalls in the United States are because of undeclared allergens. Now, allergens themselves are not a danger. It's undeclared allergens that are a huge danger. I'm not trying to limit to downplay the impact and the severity of allergen. But if I'm allergic to one of the U.S. allergens, and you tell me it's on a product, you know, that it could be in a product, I don't buy it. But if you don't tell me, now you're putting me at probably some grave risk. So 3.6% of Americans have food allergens, yet roughly half of the product recalls are because of undeclared food allergens. That's a lot of money. So the industry as a whole needs to tighten up on that. So if I'm importing from you, I'm going to ask a list of all the ingredients that are in your facility, because I don't want to risk. Remember, I'm responsible for what's going on in that facility. So let's say I'm importing dried navy beans from you, and that's all I'm thinking about. And I haven't thought to ask about what else is in the facility, but you have soybeans in there. I haven't thought about that. And now there's this potential allergen cross-contact risk that I'm responsible to make sure is being taken care of. So I'm going to request from my suppliers a list of all the ingredients in your facility, updated each year, but also say that if you add or delete something within that year, you need to tell me. Maybe you're taking out the soybeans and I no longer have to worry about it, so your plan changes, my plan changes. Or if you're adding it. And I don't want to rely, if I'm an importer, I don't want to rely on my foreign supplier to know for certain what the allergens are in the United States. I want to make the call because it's on me. I'm the one who's responsible now. And a recall plan is something new in U.S. regulations. A lot of people thought that was required before. It wasn't. It was always a good idea to have it. Some small manufacturers had trouble with it, but it is required now, a recall plan. So you monitor the written procedures, including the frequency, who's going to perform them, what tests, that sort of thing. Corrective actions, I covered it a little bit, so I'm not going to spend much more time because I do want to cover a number of things. Just keep an eye on my time here. and verification. So it's validation, calibration, reviewing records, that sort of thing. These are all these components that an importer has to be reviewing from you. The recall plan, here's the components of it. How you're going to notify, how you're going to recall it, and perhaps dispose of it if needed. And reanalysis. So again, it's not something that you do and put on the shelf. If I'm importing from you and there's not an issue at all, and so I've approved you, let's say 22nd of April in 2022, 3 years from now in April, I need to reapprove you. Probably pretty quick work if there's not been an issue. If there has been something in the meantime, if we get if you send me a test result, or FDA puts you on import alert or something like that, that's an immediate red flag for a reanalysis, right? So from an importer perspective, you're kind of reevaluating your foreign supplier on a shipment by shipment basis, depending on the size of your firm. Every day you're reevaluating your suppliers because you're reviewing test results, information about audits, perhaps, anything related to the food that's going on in the facility that's producing that food. You're reviewing it, so you're reevaluating supplier all the time. But hopefully you get in that three-year window, and you don't have to do much. But even if you approved me today, and then you do have some issues with something with me over the 3 years, you still 3 years from now reevaluate me and you create a document saying, I reapprove the supplier. So here's required records. Now this is required records for a supplier. In a little bit, I'm going to show you what an importer needs from you. A written food safety plan. And notice that it did not say HACCP. HACCP is great. For the regulations for the United States, HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. Seafood and juice. Those regulations still are in place. They've been in place since the late 90s. If you're producing seafood or juice, you are still subject only to HACCP regulations. These other things I'm talking about with Food Safety Modernization Act don't apply from a regulatory standpoint. But you could still be inspected, and your importer could still be inspected via HACCP inspection. So you want to keep that in mind. If I'm an importer of a different type of product, and my supplier says, well, here's my HACCP plan, I have to go back and say, well, I need to review it, and I'm probably going to have to go back and say, you know what, this is good, it's a good start, it's most of the way there. But HACCP is not preventive controls. Preventive controls have some extra features in it, and essentially it is the focus on prevention, and that's got to be accounted for in a plan. So somebody could be the world's foremost expert on HACCP, but if they don't have any training on preventive controls, they're not qualified to produce this written food safety plan either. So again, if you're getting any pushback from your suppliers or your supplier and you're thinking HACCP, you need to think preventive controls. And a quick Google search, preventive controls versus HACCP, you'll find a few articles that are really good. The document training for the qualified individual, so I kind of touched on that. And in this publication here, feel free to take it. It's our annual publication, Supply Chain Issues. I think it's in my office now, our new one. But they got delayed, and then it was, I don't know what, But this is last year's, and we did something that explains what a preventive control qualified individual is. Every facility that's producing food needs at least one preventive control qualified individual. So again, that's where that HACCP kind of, if they're great on HACCP, but they have no training in preventive controls, then they have to show somewhere where they've studied preventive controls, what they've read on it, if they've taken a course or something like that, to demonstrate that they're aware of the preventive control regulation. Okay. It's always good to have at least 2 people take a preventive control curriculum and that sort of thing, at least 2 people qualified, because if FDA wants to come tomorrow and that person is away, family leave, at a trade show, whatever, who is going to speak with FDA? And the importers, it's the same thing. There should always be, no matter the size of the company, at least 2. Now, a very large company is probably going to have a whole department. But I'm going to blow through these very quickly, too, because you'll be able to look at them later. Sorry, there's not more differentiation in the colors, but these are inspection results and where suppliers are falling short. Now, that's pretty good, though, because you're seeing that the worst one was in 2021, but 15% of the facilities inspected didn't have a food safety plan. Yeah, that's much too high. These numbers up top are better, 4%, 7% total. So that means clearly there's got to be some better outreach. And FDA has done a great job of outreach, but whenever a regulation is written, the people who it's primarily written for are the last ones to pay attention to it and follow it, and that's what's happening here. So this 15%, the share of the food produced and marketed by them, I'm sure, is much less than 15%. Hazard analysis, critical controls. Now, this is a bigger issue. So, in general, 19% haven't done a hazard analysis. 24% haven't identified preventive controls, and 13% of those who have them aren't carrying them out. All right. Those with plans, so again, you'll be able to read these going short. So here it's not bad. If somebody understands the need to have a plan, for the most part, they are carrying out the various steps. Okay. And then allergen controls, see, 11% don't have allergen controls. A lot of money that's going to get wasted there, unfortunately. Supply chain management program. Now, this is going to apply mostly with these types of inspections about U.S. manufacturers, because, but it could actually be foreign also. If you're producing food, you have to have records about the ingredients showing that they were grown in accordance with, say, the produce safety rule. And that becomes part of your supply chain management program. And you have to have those records. And then, because what you're going to do later in your preventive control plan, you're saying what you're doing to address the hazards with the ingredients, if there are any hazards. But you're demonstrating, okay, they were in good shape when they got here. This is what we did in our process, and everything is okay, kind of thing. So results of domestic inspections, I have more I want to cover, so I'm not going to really go into the details on this. And I want to definitely leave time for some questions. Where suppliers are falling short, so the importer inspections here, you can see how many we've had. Now, NAI is no action indicated, voluntary is VAI, and OAI is official. So, it's hard to tell on this, but there was almost no OAI early on because FDA was educate while we regulate. They wanted to bring everybody up to compliance in both the human food and the FSVP of importers. They're shifting away from that now. So if a company has done nothing to comply with the regulation, there's going to definitely be some OAI official action indicated because they're not going to have what they need. But I can tell you that although it's no longer an official policy, educate while we regulate is still in place. So if you're doing your best and there's a minor issue in that, they're going to still work with you. You show them what you've done to, in terms of an effort to comply, and they will still work with you. One thing to keep in mind with all of this stuff too, that the need for communication is huge and working together and that sort of thing. If I'm an importer and I get inspected about stuff I brought in from you and the records aren't very good because you haven't been giving me what I've been asking for, your chance of an inspection just went through the roof. Makes sense, right? FDA has doubts about their food. So that's a message that importers are trying to get across to suppliers. And then it works the other way around too. If FDA goes and inspects a foreign supplier and doesn't like what it sees, the importer's chance of inspection just went way up. And you also want to keep an eye out what's going on elsewhere. So you're bringing in a product and there's an import alert issued by FDA for that same product from somebody else. Your chance of inspection just went up. And your chances of your sampling and testing at import went up. And this is right from the former director of import operations at FDA. He continually told us that when he spoke at our meetings. He said, we have reason now to be concerned about that product. We want to make sure it's not happening elsewhere. So as an importer, if I see an import alert about a product that I'm bringing in or one that has very similar risks as mine, I need to reach out to my foreign supplier and say, look, here's what happened. This is an import alert, and it's for this reason, because the import alerts explain why. And, can this happen with our stuff? And, you take a proactive step at that point to make sure that it can happen to you. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on import alerts, and you can subscribe to them on the FDA website. They come in Monday morning. And there's also another subscription that you can get, warning letters. Those come in Wednesday morning. And it's a good way to keep up to date on what's going on so that you know what to be looking for in case there's any issues with products you handle or something that's very similar. Yeah. So we'll do this. I want to talk about registration because a lot of times, downstairs I have a booth. And people, I'm thinking about coming into the U.S. market. What do I have to do? Well, the first step is register your facility. And it applies to U.S. facilities, foreign facilities, and the like. The only difference is a foreign facility needs to name someone in the United States to be their facility registration agent. It's essentially a communications conduit between FDA and the facility. It's different than an FSVP agent, right? I'll have some more on that later because that's a really important difference. There are some issues with agents. We're coming up with, as you see, it must be renewed every 2 years, so it's the last quarter of even-numbered years. So it'll be happening soon. If you haven't started getting scary emails about facility registration yet, you will. There's one company in particular that really tries to scare people. Facility registration is the easiest part of compliance that there is out there. It's not difficult. So if you get an email saying, have us check to make sure your facility registration is in place, ignore it. Reach out to who is your agent and say, are we still good? And don't fall for it. Some people say, because what happens, you contact this company, they don't have access to your facility registration because they didn't do it. So they'll tell you, well, you know what? You better have us do another one for you. So you're going to pay them to do it. And then because they might get you to do that over the summer, that doesn't matter because on October 1st, the renewal period starts, you got to do it again, you're going to pay them again. So when you get that, or if your suppliers get it, if you're an importer and your supplier, tell them, don't respond to those emails. Check with us first, whomever. We serve as the agent for any company that's a member of our association. It's just included in our dues. And our importer members love that because then they know that the foreign suppliers are getting good information on a regular basis about compliance and the whole thing. So, and our dues is less than the other companies charge just to be your agent. And then they're trying to sell you stuff after. So just an option, but if you need recommendations for other people to be agent, go ahead. But just be ready for those scary emails. PCQI, so I talked about this a little bit, Preventive Control Qualified Individual. And here's the definition. They must have successfully completed training in the development and application of risk-based preventive controls, or be otherwise qualified through job experience to develop and apply a food safety system. So the way it's actually worded in the regulation is education, training, experience, or a combination thereof. So particularly with the PCQI, yeah, you might have somebody that's been around in the food industry for 30 years, food scientist, the whole thing, knows everything pretty well. But if they haven't, like I mentioned, become familiar with preventive controls in this regulation, they are not going to meet the definition of a PCQI. There is a course, which I think is, this PCQI training. It's the best way to get the training you need, and they get a certificate when they get done. All right. It's offered in person, hybrid, and fully online in every language you could think of. Even before the pandemic, it was available online, which was good because in a faraway country, it was kind of silly to make them come all the way to the United States, so the time and the money, and then sit and listen to somebody speak in English when it's not their native language. So it was great that was one of the first ones. Now, I forget if I have it on the next slide or not, but it's the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, so FSPCA. That's the training you want. That's the one where you get the certificate. Some companies will offer preventive controls training, but it's not the FSPCA course. And then you're not going to get the certificate. And you're not going to know, in order to be an FSPCA instructor, you have to meet certain qualifications. And you sit through the course and you teach back part of the course, and it's a process. You want to make sure that you're getting the FSPCA course, because that means this instructor has taken the time and demonstrated to others that they know the material and can teach it to you. So it's Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance. What's your customer need from you? All right, this is something I get asked a lot downstairs. Now, what I did here, I underlined. So, like, this is the list. If I'm an importer, I'm sharing this with the people in my office so that they understand why I'm being such a pain in the neck. I'm asking for all these things, and I'm sharing it with my foreign suppliers. And what I've done here is I've underlined where I think I'm coming to you for help if you're a foreign supplier. The regulation requires a hazard analysis. Now, the regulation I'm talking about now, I've kind of morphed now. I've gone into the Foreign Supplier Verification Programs regulation. That regulation requires a hazard analysis. It does not require me, the importer, to do it, which is a huge relief for importers, because many of them would not be able to write a hazard analysis. The regulation requires one, you're my supplier, I can review yours. I can't just get yours, I have to review it, sign it, and date it. And that's key. So the hazard analysis, and I underline risk posed by the food, because that's actually part of the hazard analysis, but for some reason it's listed separately in a lot of the government paperwork. Evaluation of foreign supplier. So remember I said that each supplier has to be approved. So I've got to have documents to show that I approved you, and those are based on these procedures for approving foreign suppliers. And then I have to have procedures to ensure use of only approved foreign suppliers. So if I don't have these, if I don't have one of these, if I don't have procedures for approving foreign suppliers and FDA comes to visit me, I'm going to have 3 or 4 demerits right off the bat, because I'm not going to have the procedures. I'm not going to be able to demonstrate that I approved that supplier, and I'm certainly not going to have a document to say I'm buying only from approved foreign suppliers. But here's a good example too. Here we're at a trade show, and if I'm an importer and somebody in purchasing is coming here, and I'm the person handling all this work in the office, and that purchasing person doesn't know that we can only use approved foreign suppliers, and they're down on the trade show floor and they run into somebody that used to be at another company, and, oh, they're good, I want to buy from you. No, they have to know that they can't do that. What they'll do is say, hey, it's good to see you again. This is what I'm interested, but this is what I'm going to need from you. I'm going to need hazard analysis and the various things that are on here. So these other things that are listed on the determination of verification activities and frequency, performance of verification activities, corrective actions, that's all part of the preventive control plan. And they're not all suppliers are happy to share that, but they have to. It says, I need it. This is the list of what I need. There's no negotiation because this is what FDA is going to expect that I have when it comes to see me. And again, keep in mind too, my customers may want some of this. As the importer of record, the same thing as an FSVP importer, and that could be crucial for this group. If anybody here is a Canadian importer who serves as the importer of record in the United States, the answer is that no, it's not, because there's a new definition with this regulation called the FSVP importer, Foreign Supplier Verification Programs importer. And it must be somebody in the United States. So I ran into one of my members yesterday. He's based here in Montreal. Importer of record, thousands of entries a year into the United States. Obviously does business up here too, but he can never be the FSVP importer in the United States. So his two options are open up a U.S. office. Then he'll have an entity in the United States, or he's got to hire an FSVP agent, someone who then is accepting responsibility and needs to carry out all the things that I've been mentioning. So I mentioned too that we're the facility registration, I think I did for hundreds of companies. We'll never be an FSVP agent though, because that would mean accepting responsibility for the safety of food and needing the knowledge about the specific foods and be able to review documents and that sort of thing. If you fall into that category and you need an FSVP agent, there are a few that I am comfortable recommending. So I could certainly pass that along. And this gets into that on that top one. If there's no U.S. owner or consignee of an article of food, so you're serving as the importer, then it's that agent that has to be done. So, and a lot of times, there's more than one entity that's going to meet the definition. So let's say I'm a New York-based importer. I've got a purchase order or contract in place from my supplier, and I've already sold the goods to my customer. Now we both meet the definition. In most cases, it's going to be best because there's only one room in the entry for an FSVP importer. One's got to be listed, and there's only room for one. So you want it to be the entity that's best able to do the work, but sometimes the customer is going to want to be it. Now, who are they going to get the information from? The importer. But you get to that commercial reality at times that customers may want to do it. Do I need a DUNS number? And this is another important one, and I'm running up on time, so I want to, everybody now needs a DUNS number. A few years back, it got implemented for U.S. importers. People were like, well, why? We have the registration in place already. Well, not all U.S. importers had to register with FDA because that pertains to people who manufacture, process, pack, or hold food. A lot of importers just have an office. So FDA said, all right, we're going to make people get DUNS numbers. And DUNS number is Dun & Bradstreet, a financial services firm that's been around since the 1700s. And it's free to get a DUNS number. Now, what's new is that, remember I mentioned it's every 2 years, renewal period. It was supposed to be fully in effect for foreign suppliers last time. They extended it. It won't be extended past this time. So if your facility doesn't yet have a DUNS number, don't go to the FDA one anymore. Well, actually, both of those will either still work or there'll be a note telling you to go to the Dun & Bradstreet site. But dunandbradstreet.com, first thing on the page is how to get a DUNS number. And as I mentioned, it won't be extended. I'd be shocked if it is. The renewal period starts October 1st. Get it now. It's free. but beat the rush. And it's facility specific, so if you have 2 production plants, you're going to need 2 DUNS numbers. Because when the entry is made, it's listing the DUNS number of the facility where it was produced. Same on the importer end, the DUNS number given is where the person and the people and the records are, who could talk about those records. It's not a good way to start an inspection by sending FDA to the wrong place, right? So it's got to be specific there. Yeah, I really had to talk. Well, from New Jersey, we talk fast anyway, but I had to go real fast, and I know we have a few minutes left for questions. I want to make sure that is my contact information, or you can give me a business card, but I'm happy to send the slides to you, or any follow-up questions that come. And again, this book has some articles in here that go into some detail on what I just talked about too. Happy to answer any questions that anybody has. We do have a few minutes.